Spider-Man Far From Home picks up where Avengers Endgame left off, and that means we're down a couple of heroes. Tony Stark made the ultimate sacrifice to save the world from the decimation, and to be honest, we're still not quite over it. Call it wishful thinking, but we think there might be a way for him to return to the MCU. Quentin Beck is supposed to be a villain, but is there a chance he could save one of our favorite heroes? We all know that Marvel Studios has a history of getting rid of characters, only for them to surprisingly come back later very much alive. But we have to say, Tony Stark looks pretty definitively and tragically gone at the end of Avengers Endgame. The latest Spider-Man Far From Home trailer revealed that Tony Stark is indeed gone, as both Peter Parker and Happy Hogan mention the loss. We also see memorials people have set up in various places to pay tribute to the great hero Iron Man, who sacrificed his own life to save everybody. Unless the MCU goes full-on Marvel zombies, we're in favor of death being permanent. It allows us to be more emotionally invested, and gives the sacrifices Tony and Natasha made much more meaning. But that doesn't mean there isn't still a way for Tony to come back in some way, even if it's not exactly the Tony we know and love. In Avengers Infinity War, we lost Gamora when Thanos threw her off a cliff in Vormir. Yet, through some time travel, we ended up with a different version of Gamora. This one has no memories of her time with the Guardians of the Galaxy, but she's still there. And the Far From Home trailer made it clear that the MCU is a multiverse, and there are various other timelines in play. Is it possible that another Tony Stark could make his way to the main universe? If so, would he be like the Tony Stark we know, or someone else entirely? Well, first there's the issue of how he'd get here, but frankly, that doesn't seem like much of an issue. While people like Scott Lang have trouble even remembering which movies even involve time travel, Tony managed to figure the whole thing out in one night. He's kind of a genius, and we imagine other versions of him would possess comparable intelligence. If he can get through the quantum realm and travel through time in one timeline, it stands to reason he could accomplish the same feat in another. As for motivation, there could be a lot of reasons he'd want to skip over to another timeline. Perhaps he suffered some great loss, like losing his wife Pepper Potts or his daughter Morgan Stark. Instead of processing his grief like most people would, maybe Tony decides to skip over to another universe where they're still alive. We're not quite sure what stage of grief that would be, but it's a possibility. It's also possible that an alternate version of Tony could have a less selfish reason for finding his way into Spider-Man Far From Home. After all, he's a hero, and clearly some bad stuff is going down in the world. But then there's the less cheerful yet intriguing idea that maybe the next Tony Stark won't be as benevolent as the last. We love that he's such a flawed character, but in the comic books, he's been downright evil sometimes. In the Superior Iron Man storyline, he's impacted by a spell cast by Scarlet Witch and Doctor Doom. It causes him to, well, be even more of a short-sighted jerk than usual. He ends up essentially giving everyone with a smartphone superpowers, and that just goes about as well as you'd expect it to. It's all part of a money-making scheme because he's just not rich enough already, and Superior Iron Man doesn't care about the potential death toll. It was so bad that even Pepper couldn't think of excuses for his bad behavior anymore and ended up turning against him. And even if he's not an outright villain, it's possible Tony Stark might be pretty far from a superhero. In Spider-Gwen, Tony Stark is an arms dealer who owns a military company called War Machine, and when he isn't making a profit selling extremely dangerous weapons, he's working on his coffee chain Starkbucks. If a non-heroic Tony Stark showed up in Spider-Man Far From Home, it would actually be a really interesting role reversal. Up until now, Tony Stark has always been a mentor to Peter Parker. He helped him learn what it means to be a superhero, and that it's a lot more than just being in a fancy suit. If Peter meets a Tony Stark who has never been Iron Man, he might find himself trying to teach a version of his former mentor how to be a hero. We're always suckers for a great redemption arc, and we loved watching Tony's the first time around. He went from warmongering to saving the world. And we could possibly see him getting bossed around by a teenage superhero who's struggling with their internship now, huh? Even if Tony Stark or a version of Tony Stark from another timeline doesn't show up, we really doubt we've seen the last of him. We already have time travel, the quantum realm, and magic stones that can wipe out half of our life in the universe. Is introducing a little bit of transhumanism into the MCU really such a stretch? Maybe we really haven't seen the last of Tony Stark. What do you think about the idea that Tony Stark might come back in Spider-Man Far From Home? Do you think it's way too crazy, or is it just crazy enough to work? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more great videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now.